My guest was on with me in January, and I was really glad to get her on because I knew quite a bit about her. Lovely, lovely woman, incredibly bright. The director of a terrific film called Vanishing of the Bees. But she's more than that. She's an investigative journalist, entrepreneur, and functional medicine consultant. Got a huge following, and we'll put out links, of course, as usual, if you are coming across her for the first time, as to where you can find her. She, of course, is hugely interested in what is going on at the moment. The pandemic, or plandemic, depending on how you see it. The response to it, the lockdown, the health impact of that lockdown, and ultimately where we're rushing towards, where we're heading, which is where I think we might be coerced, if not forced, but coerced maybe, into having a vaccine that we don't want. I'm delighted to welcome back to the programme Maryam Henein. Really delighted. So look, I just said to our listener just before you came on, the obvious first question is, what has this been like in Costa Rica then, this whole lockdown thing?
So interestingly, we arrived the day after coronavirus did. And the first thing that I saw getting off the plane was an advert on the wall, a sliding advert. So it was showing Avis. And then it was showing how to lavos los manos. And I'm like, look at the messaging. It's the exact same thing. It's definitely a global orchestrated event because at this point, Zach and I had been covering coronavirus since January. January 16th was the first man on the street. So then I reached out to a reporter at La Nación and started, translating the Spanish newspapers to see what was going on. And based on 2 supposed deaths of coronavirus, I'm sure they died, but who knows of what, they shut down everything. There's curfew. There is a curfew. Licensed cars can only drive on certain days. There is a total, last I checked a couple of days ago, of 4 deaths, 700 suspected cases. Just shared information that 2 people were found to supposedly have infiltrated the country and are infected and are spending their quarantine sick in a detention center. And that 7,600 people have tried to come in to the country and have been refused. So the song and dance is here as well.
It's there as well. That's a very important point you made there a second ago. The language that kind of landed in our faces really was the same everywhere in the world at the exact same time. And you know what's interesting too, Maryam, the lockdown measures, they came about them really quickly. It was almost like they were sitting in a drawer somewhere or in a shelf just waiting to be used, right?
Absolutely. What's wonderful is that day by day, people are waking up. And if this doesn't wake them up, then I don't know what will. But there's so many of us that were on the front lines calling BS. And when you see you are in the jungle, you need the ocean. The beaches are closed. Yeah. Wouldn't this be a wonderful thing for the ions, for our immune system? Here at least, if I were to show you how beautiful it is, Richie, that I can go for a walk, I can be in nature, hung out with monkeys the other day.
Lovely.
And chose to come here because I felt something was going to happen and to see it carry out and also to see the division here, even in Costa Rica. This is a community of expats, chose to come here also because there's no shortage of food. They have been very industrious in turning their farmers markets into delivery. They have food, they want to sell it. But also seeing that there are some people that I saw a friend that happened to be here, reached out to me, and I went just naturally to hug him. And then he's like, I was just at the market. And I realized, we're doing this. And of course, yes, sure, let's be precautious. And he's like, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist? How about those 2 people that I know that died?
2.
And I said, okay, let's look at those 2 people who died. Did they have pre-existing conditions? Do you know exactly what happened in the hospital? Were they put on a ventilator, which is akin to the final nail in a coffin? Ventilators. Like, one has to wonder what's all this rage with the ventilators. And then you find out that one of the side effects, and of course I'm seeing things also from a functional medicine point of view, that within minutes, some people can, once they're intubated, put under coma, that they will have a cardiac arrest. Does that sound familiar of some of the reports that we're seeing? Because really we've created a cocktail where it's so difficult to point exactly, and that's exactly what they want. What more do we need once we learn? And I've spoken to someone who said, a mortician I know was told to sign an NDA. I was reporting about the BS deaths back in March. What more do we need to call this off?
Funny you mentioned that. The Sky News in the UK is the sister station of Fox News. And they spoke to a young lady last week whose boyfriend, Maryam, had gone into hospital. He was overweight, the lad. He was overweight, you know. He was far heavier than he should have been. He was a bit obese, God love him. And he had the chest problems. He had the breathing problems. He wasn't too bad. Anyway, she gets a phone call one morning to say that he's dead. And they said that they had intubated him. And when they were fixing his bed or something, and they were turning him from his back onto his front, he had a heart attack and died. And we are hearing stories about people who were intubated here and died. And I know you've, from the very beginning, you followed the Dr. Cameron Seidel story in New York. I mean, he was very brave, that doctor, who said, look, I think we're killing people by putting the intubation into them because it's an altitude type sickness we're seeing. Can I ask you about that? And I've got to first of all say, Maryam is a health journalist as well as a functional medicine practitioner, so she's following this closely.
I'm not a practitioner. I'm a consultant.
A consultant, excuse
me.
You're quite, and a coach. I should make that clear. Thanks for that, Maryam. So what is it then? I mean, what actually is the virus? Before we get into, you know, what has happened, what happened in China, what didn't happen. It seems to me, and I know nothing now, but that around about December, January, February, people were ill and it was worse than the normal flu. I had it.
Yes.
What do you think?
Yes. Earlier, initially, I just saw, I had called out that I suspect that my hunch was has been here earlier than that. And I'm not saying that there's no virus. There could be two types, as they're reporting, the L and the S. And depending on who you are and what your more comorbidities are, what you eat, makes a difference in how it's going to express itself. What medications have you been on in the past? Like, for instance, a couple of weeks ago, they said some anchor died. But then when I looked into her, she had recovered from cancer.
Right.
So who's to know? Because people don't look at details anymore. And that's where the devil lies. And there's this age of mediocrity, and people die every single day. And we're not dismissing that people are dying or that there is a virus, but we are dismissing the fact that we have an immune system and that we should focus on what we can do and realize that we are being bombarded 24/7 around the world with fear porn. And we've caught MSM lying, presenting fake footage, and we've spoken to enough people, courageous people, who are telling us, like, why was that doctor? He's being instructed not to use the machines where you can just put a simple cannula with oxygen, an oxygen generator. You're going straight bypassing to the ventilator, also because you're going to get $39,000. Where is the Hippocrates oath? Where is the allegiance to humanity?
First, do no harm, right? First, do no harm is what a doctor swears. I will first of all do no harm. And I wonder why Cameron Seidel, he said this and he put it on his YouTube channel. And I know he's left emergency medicine. I know he's doing something else. But again, where's his fellow practitioners? I know some nurses have come out. Where's the courage to come out and say, look, this is terribly wrong, we're killing people? Maryam, as far as you understand it, Is it true that thousands of people in New York City have died in intubation? Is that about right? Is it really that many thousands?
I have not looked at the exact amount of deaths regarding intubations. If we look at how many millions of ventilators with 3M and GM that we're creating, and the fact that if you look on the CDC, because remember, these treatments, whether it's HCQ or remdesivir, is under emergency authorization in America. So none of them are FDA approved. It just gives the allurance that if you go on the page, the first treatment that is suggested is ventilation, is to put someone on a ventilator. So that makes you scratch your head. Yeah. I have no doubt that people are dying needlessly. And then, there's people that are coming and saying, my husband died, had a heart condition, but he was listed as a coronavirus death. In the UK, early on, I saw the bills to fast track how someone signs off on a death certificate, right. That there no longer needs two people. And it's, fast, everything's fast, medicine, like big numbers, fast, this is good. No, it's not good, because every person is an individual. And if we were to look, also they're migrating numbers. It's been stated. How can Fauci on one side of his mouth say that this is going to cause all these deaths when they were looking at the wrong predictive models, and then in a journal of medicine write that it's no more fatal than the flu? And no one's also looking at the environmental indicators, what was really going on in Wuhan. Is there the possibility, and this is a possibility, that I suspect that Charles Lieber is implicated, and that somehow 5Geo is implicated in some ways. And I say 5Geo because, it's become a bad word as well. It's been vaporized.
Hey, listen, do us a favor. Remind our listeners who Charles Lieber is, because some of them will be like, who the hell is he?
Yes. Okay, so early on, and I'm putting together a very thorough timeline for Vaxxter that will really take people through the timeline, because there's so much to suss out. So in, I think, January 20th or so, maybe a little bit earlier, there were 3 arrests. The DOJ came out and stated that Charles Lieber from Harvard, this is a very prominent, distinguished nanoscientist who has 50 plus patents, who has delved into nanotech, wires, the ability to suss out a virus before you even know it, which is very aligned with what's happening with AI and all these big tech companies. So initially on video, it's stating that he was linked with espionage because he was working with the Wuhan Virology Institute and the Thousands Projects plan. I looked at the court documents. He is not charged with espionage. He gets a little tap on the wrist, and he's charged with fraud, and somehow he manages to get out of, someone pays $1 million cash bond. And then you realize that Harvard owns part of his property. So this man was also linked with 2 other arrests of Chinese nationals, one that was caught stealing vials from Beth Israel Hospital, and another woman who is arguably she's MIA and maybe back in China. So then kind of disappeared. Then other people have caught on. Now, what's interesting, I'll just say about this Charles Lieber, he has ties with Dr. Nowak, who has ties with Epstein. We know that Harvard refused to give back money. They have billions in endowment funds. Recently, President Trump asked them to give back the money in regards to the stimulus package. Who knows if he was referring to something else. So there's all these strange ties, but this is a prized asset, in my opinion. And my belief, which has yet to be substantiated 100%, is that there was something, possibly some type of nanotech, whether in a vaccine, that parlays with 5Geo. Now, I have come across documents that state that is happening or that is being researched. And there are other players that are involved. So one other thing about Charles Lieber, the day he lives in Massachusetts, he's told to give back his passports. So he's not, him and his wife. And the day after Boston announces a state of emergency, there's an order that is filed requesting that he visit Pennsylvania and New Jersey. The government has no problems and assents to this. And where is Charles Lieber today? During a shutdown of your state, you are allowed to leave, and there's nothing has been filed since. So I hope that explains who he is.
It does indeed. It's a great answer, Maryam. Maryam Henein is live on the radio program today. A functional medicine coach, but more importantly, an investigative journalist and the director of the terrific Vanishing of the Bees. She's live in Costa Rica at the moment for us, and this is really important stuff. Listen, you can say 5G on this program. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
I think it won't be long before the YouTube channel that we have is gone, and I don't mind that. I don't really care too much about YouTube. It's a live radio show and it's on iTunes and plenty of other places, and I hate uploading to YouTube anyway. I can't stand Google and YouTube. But we can talk 5G. I'm fascinated by the 5G angle and what people have been saying and what David Icke has been saying and many others.
I lived across the street, Richie, from a 5G pole in Beechwood. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's important. Do, because I was going to say to you, in many places in the country here, it isn't actually operational as of yet. And that's why I'm kind of keeping my powder dry about 5G, but I'm very open-minded. Now this is important. So where you were in California, it was there and it was functional, was it?
Okay, so in Beechwood, Los Angeles, it's that iconic street where there's the Hollywood sign at the end of it. So AT&T, and I had people tell me it's not on. I'm sorry, you didn't get an EMF meter and go across the street and take levels. True. And my girlfriend and I, who is equally sensitive and is also an excellent journalist, because I'm a sensitive person. I'm ironically like an environmental indicator because of being exposed to pesticides and having multiple chemical sensitivities. Yeah. So I feel things that others don't. That might be described as a freak. I think it's a superpower. So what I felt, and mind you, I was also dealing with mold toxicity, and I can speak with authority on mold. Just to say that Dr. Klinkhart, who's a very well-respected functional medicine practitioner, had conducted a test where he put 2 petri dishes with mold spores. One of them had a Faraday cage. The other one was exposed by electromagnetic pollution, and the release of the mycotoxin increased by 600% because the frequency excites and fears and causes with mold. Just to say that the mold and the spores, the mycotoxins, the dead spores are more dangerous. So I was living in an environment where I was dealing with mold, but I had this 5G. And I started to notice, and this is not easy to divulge or be vulnerable with, that my mental thoughts were they would go in waves, and I would have very negative thoughts. And it's hard to parse out, which is a perfect storm that they've created in a lot of aspects, what was causing what. But my girlfriend and I both left, and she reported back to me, I cannot tell you how much better my mental state is. And I posted something on Nextdoor, which in America links communities together, just prompting people, because that's what I like to do, provoke discussion, critical thinking. Hey, is anyone else feeling? I was bashed down. I was called a tinfoil wearing person.
Of course. And
people were just so happy that they are in the hills and now can use their effing cell phones. Yeah. And then there were others who reported malaise and strange feelings. So this is anecdotal evidence that at some point becomes empirical data, not to discount that there was a petition written that was signed by thousands of scientists.
Thousands, yeah. Let me ask you this. This is really good. I used to understand that for me to pick up 5G, that there would have to be transmitters right outside my front door and all of that. And I'll tell you what I found. This is really interesting. My mobile phone company sends me a new smartphone every 2 years. That's fine, right? So they send me one, and they've been operating on 4G for years now. What's interesting is, Maryam, I was sent a new smartphone about 11 weeks ago, and this one is 5G ready, this particular smartphone. And I thought, well, that doesn't matter because, 5G, there are no transmitters in my immediate area. However, in a park, a half a mile away from here, when I'm elevated, it's a park on a hill. It's a well-known park in Salford called Buell Hill Park. When I'm up on the park, I look at the phone and it clicks from 4G into 5G. And I really wonder about that. And for a few minutes, it's on 5G. And I'm looking around thinking, where's that coming from? I thought you had to be pretty close to pick it up. I think that's some sort of red herring. I don't think you've got to be close at all. I don't know, maybe I'm talking complete nonsense here now. I thought that the 5G transmitter didn't I'm an idiot now. I don't know how to say this.
I understand.
That it worked on
I
short
am
distance.
not well versed enough.
Me neither, yeah. But I could pick it up.
To comment on that, but I'd like to say that initially I know that AT&T, for instance, just as a marketing gimmick, put 5G, and that's why a lot of people were telling me, oh no, it's not on. But when I called AT&T, they said that it was a testing ground. Now consider that's just AT&T. What happens when other phone companies are also? What happens when the Internet of Things connects everything on this basically grid? Also, another thing with Lieber is that he's a consultant working with Elon Musk to create a neural link. We can argue that all of this stay at home, this conditioning is to usher us into this new world of AI. Also on the bill in the UK, did you see that they changed it and it's kind of a hologram and it looks like, do you know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about. Yeah. I can't say exactly what it is, but I've been following this in the last few weeks. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's the logo.
It's the logo and also the crown on the top, which is a corona that was replaced with something that looks like the coronavirus.
I know when we talk about these things, I know there are some listeners who they come through commercial radio, Fab Radio here in Manchester, and they think, oh, this is crazy. But it's not, though.
It is crazy.
I know it's crazy, yeah. But we're not crazy to be discussing it because it's relevant. The silly point I was trying to make, and I didn't make it. No. I was an idiot. Basically, I was led to believe that over longer distances, 5G didn't work that well. It was more of a shorter wave thing. However, I'm beginning to wonder about that because in certain places, the phone will go to 5G, and I'm not near any transmitter. At least one that I can see visually.
At least one that you can see visually, because I did take the EMF meter, one that Dr. Mercola had recommended, and I would test it. I would turn off my Wi-Fi at night, but yet, there's also was an app that I downloaded that you can just put it up and you can see all the signals and how congested it is. That's just from Wi-Fi, let alone again when the Internet of Things connects everything. And I think it's just we've created a perfect cocktail. It's just exactly like with the bees. It's this perfect storm. It's insidious. It's difficult to point out and say this is what happened. So, but with coronavirus, with COVID-19, I was speaking to an editor yesterday, and he's like, I know two people who have it, which is high fever and this type of altitude sickness. So I'm not discounting that there can be two types of strains and that there could be a virus. We've had viruses before, but I can say, having done a deep dive into these players, whether it's Birx or Fauci, that Fauci, for instance, I was just pulling clips on Zika, and I covered Zika extensively as to what it really was all about, is to create a vaccine, justify more spraying of chemicals that actually cause microcephalus, and dispense genetically modified mosquitoes, some of them that when in close proximity to a certain antibiotic do not terminate. That means you have a mutant genetically modified mosquito possibly mating with a normal mosquito and creating what exactly?
Yeah.
So it's the same. It's the same playbook, different epidemic, and bravo to them because bravo.
Yeah.
I mean, look at this global rollout.
By the way, Maryam, the symbol on the £20 note that is an interesting one, that because I've had a couple of tweets from people, and I've also had a couple of emails, and there are two trains of thought on it. There are people who absolutely believe that it does resemble a transmitter, and that the virus symbol is on top of it. They say it definitely does, but yet the Bank of England has apparently said that the tower, in fact, is Margate Lighthouse, and it's to do with the artist J.M.W. Turner. But again, some people are saying, well, they would say that, wouldn't they? It's just the timing of it. It's just remarkable, and it does resemble that which you said it does. And they always have an answer, these people. It doesn't necessarily mean they're telling the truth, but just in the interest of fair play, the Bank of England are saying, look, it's a lighthouse and all of that.
Absolutely. I have a clip that I was going to post of it on the side so you can see the rings. It's the rings that kind of connote maybe some type of wave, but of course we can't tell. I mean, and it's like, let's say the bat on the coin to celebrate American Samoa.
Yeah.
On the same day that President Trump, by the way, called it a state of emergency in American Samoa, just coincidentally, you can argue and say, well, the bat is also a pollinator that is very much under threat. Maybe we're celebrating the bats. But on the other end, it just seems like an ode to the bats and all that they have brought. You know, when you link it to the crazier stories of eating blood and such, it's just, and then the Pope also made a reference to bats. It's just bizarre.
It is bizarre. Maryam, lots of unbelievable interest in this, unsurprisingly. Joanne is in Chorlton, which is in Manchester. It's South Manchester, Chorlton. And Joanne says, Richie, 5G is line of sight. That makes sense, because if I'm up on top of a hill and the hill that I stand on looks straight down on Media City, UK, which is a major hub for the BBC, ITV television, it's all there. So that's really, really interesting, that. So maybe that's why the phone clicks into 5G. So the question is, we've seen Facebook accounts being deleted, YouTube channels. I'm speaking about David Icke, who's obviously the most famous one, but others are being deleted because they're drawing an inference, they're drawing a conclusion that 5G might aggravate in some way the symptoms of this virus. I'm open-minded. Is with the evidence you have, Maryam, is that what your gut tells you, that the 5G?
Yes.
Right, go ahead. Explain that, how it works.
Yes. Absolutely. Aggravate is a beautiful word to use. It can aggravate, depending, again, on the person and the sensitivity. I believe that. I don't think, I certainly, having experienced the aggravation. But again, a lot of these things that are invisible, whether it's invisible enemy, are hard to prove, especially when we have humans that just put credence on things that they can see. Yeah. The real thing is, are you open-minded? Is this event, which I think and others think is a live exercise, just like Dark Winter, is there something afoot here? It seems so. Is it natural for our immune system to not be able to be intermingling? Can we look to Sweden to see how they got over things? Can we look to see how antibodies, which was supposed to be a good thing to show that your immune system had built up resistance, that they're now telling us that you can get reinfected again and it doesn't prove anything? Can we see how Western medicine is maligning using a faulty PCR test that just looks at genetic code. And can we see that when we add all of these things together, given the Wuhan military games, given Bill Gates's pandemic production in November, given Event 201 and other BS epidemics like anthrax, the anthrax letters, that there was an FBI investigation that they just really dropped, but was used as an opportunity to usher in the Patriotic Act and to continue the terror that was instituted with 9/11.
Let me just make something very clear here, because there will be some people saying, what's the evidence that 5G aggravates the virus? Well, I think Maryam would be the first to admit, because she's a journalist and deals in facts, that it's a suspicion that she has at the moment. But there is a huge but here. Dr. Christopher Busby, who was on this radio program a half a dozen times in the last 6 months, when he was on most recently, he's based in Latvia. There isn't anybody more eminent in science than Dr. Christopher Busby on the effects of non-ionizing radiation on the human body. Yeah. And Christopher Busby said to me, he believes emphatically that that 5G waves could aggravate the symptoms of somebody who's got a nasty or a rotten virus. And you know what he said to me, Maryam? Yeah. He said that might explain, he said, why people get worse in hospital. Now, of course, we talked about the ventilators earlier on, which you don't believe are any good at all. And I did talk to Chris about the ventilators, and he said, yeah, fine. But he said, I wouldn't rule it out that if you go into hospital feeling, bad, that it might get worse. And then he said, because if 5G is working anywhere for sure at the moment, it's around hospitals. And he's right.
I don't know about hospitals. I know that I've gotten reports of schools being worked on and with trucks outside, so that they're arguably, this will end when the infrastructure is put in place. There are certainly, I haven't gone down that rabbit hole other than having experienced it and have copious links to offer someone if they want to look further down 5G, and to say that we are made of electricity and water, and that at the heart of disease is inflammation, at the heart is mitochondrial dysfunction. The mitochondria is the nucleus that helps produce the ATP production of energy, and that what we're seeing is a cytokine storm where the body kind of malfunctions and attacks itself. And so depending on whether there is different types of strains and depending on your condition, meaning what your pre-existing conditions and health history is, you will see it pronounced in a different way. Do you have a history of respiratory issues? Let's not also forget that respiratory issues are either the fourth or fifth leading cause of death, and that the lungs, also the environment, if you look at Wuhan, they protested, and for the Chinese to protest back in November against the pollution and the incinerators that they were going to bring in, that also plays a role. So it's about specifics and details. I wanted to talk also, Richie, shortly, just touch upon these nursing homes and these what I call low-hanging fruit, because I find it bizarre, having spoken to a health official in Washington, which was ground zero, which was where patient zero was. Initially, it was reported that the infected or suspected infected or patient zero had returned from Wuhan. And I have this on record. And that the 746 returnees. Now, then a week later, we were introduced with the term community spread.
That's right.
And after that, there have also been in Washington, home of Bill Gates, Microsoft, that there have also been homeless shelters that have had community spread. Why is it that Native American reservations, prisons, nursing homes, homeless shelters are highly impacted? Of course, they are petri dishes, and goodness knows what kind of conditions are there. But could it be that they are low-hanging fruit and that there is a mini culling. Is that too radical to share?
No, it isn't. Listen, this is a free speech platform. Of course it's not too radical to share. I've had an Irish journalist of great reputation on the programme, John Waters, who's at the moment challenging the Irish government in the High Court to basically throw off the lockdown measures. He's arguing in court with an Irish journalist called Gemma O'Doherty that the lockdown is unconstitutional. He's a lovely guy. And John came on here, and basically the gist of what he was saying to me is that people they're basically being killed in nursing homes, because there are people in nursing homes and they don't have any symptoms. They don't have any symptoms, nor do they have any indications that they have the virus. They're being forced to stay there. They're not being allowed to leave. They're being locked in. They can't go outdoors. There's no light. There's no fresh air. There's no anything. Of course you can throw that on the table.
The aircon system in itself.
That's right. Unhealthy, to say the least. Listen, you can say what you want here. It's a free speech platform. That's a huge issue here in this country, in the UK and in Ireland, what's happening in care homes. And
nursing home plus coronavirus equals death, pretty much.
Pretty much.
Pretty much. And the fact also that, my friend had to fight in Montreal to go and see Old Man Joe, a friend of his. He had a mask and gloves, but he wasn't allowed. So we're deprived of human touch and interconnection. I called 5 to 6 nursing homes in Quebec, where there's high rates, supposedly, of COVID-19, New York and New Jersey. They either hung up on me when I stated I was a journalist or told me they were told not to talk to me. Then I went and I started saying I'm a student of journalism to see if that would allow someone to speak to me. No one did.
Nobody said anything. Nobody came back to you.
No, why is there a lack of courage? Because people are being bullied, because everybody wants to put food on their table. But, we need to stick together like bees. And there's this, first of all, the vaccine, this is the most divisive topic of our era. And one has to wonder where this mania comes from, and then also there's this whole battle war on hydrochloroquine. I don't know if did you see the 3-minute montage of a TV show called The Dead Zone from 17 years ago, Richie?
I didn't know. Tell me. I know the show and the Stephen King book. No, tell me about it.
It talks in there. It's basically, let's call it lockdown. And someone put together the show and truncated it in 329. Basically, the boom in there is that they use hydrochloroquine, and they even mention the word corona virus. Wow. And you look at that and you think of all this predictive programming. I'm reviewing all the sci-fi movies from a different lens. I would watch them and they would feel like, I can see this happening. I can feel this happening as an intuitive being. And now going back and seeing, wow, when you learn that the CDC works and has, maybe I told you this last time, works with Hollywood.
Yeah, we've covered this going back years, even with Jim Marrs, the late great Jim Marrs, got a lot of mentions this week. Great writer. Yes. Listen, I just want to do a quick time check. It's 19 and a half minutes past the hour. Maryam Henein is live from Costa Rica. This is really important stuff. It's not been discussed outside of the independent media. It's not been discussed anywhere. Maryam is the lady behind Vanishing of the Bees. She's a functional medicine consultant and an investigative journalist. Vaxter is a really great platform, by the way. We might talk a bit about that later on. It's really important. We've been talking, I've just been asked to clarify my own opinion. You see, my opinion doesn't matter because I'm a presenter. My opinions matter not a damn. It's me. It's me to ask questions. But people have asked me to clarify, what do I think about 5G? This is what I think. I think that when some researchers in the UK jumped to immediately claim that 5G had caused the virus, I felt that they were reckless and that they were silly and that it was nonsense. They shouldn't have done that. But listen to Christopher Busby, and you mentioned the thousands of real scientists, at least according to the establishment, they're real scientists, Ivy League men and women, who wrote a paper in 2017 that said that 5G can do things to us on a cellular level that were unprecedented and that could make people extremely ill, respiratory problems and all of that. It's all in the public domain. So my position, and I know nothing, it's just my opinion, it's not fact,
Yes.
it's my opinion, is that I don't doubt that if somebody had a bad virus, that being exposed to 5G wave radiation could certainly exacerbate those symptoms and make them even more unwell. That's what I think. But I don't have I don't have your experience researching health. I have none of that whatsoever. It's just what I think, and that's what I would say. But I think it was reckless for people to say that 5G caused the virus. It's a bit silly, and I think it made good investigative reporters, I think it made them look a bit silly in the eyes of the wider public, who don't normally get their information from Dr. Mercola. They don't normally get their information from Sherry Tenpenny. They don't normally hear from Maryam Henein.
Yeah.
And so you got these idiots in the independent media, and I wonder sometimes.
Yeah. we need to be more vigilant than ever as journalists in the way that we present things. Certainly, if I'm writing a story, everything is backed up, and if it's opinion, it's opinion. I do have a declassified paper that someone sent me showing how these millimeter waves can impact. Certainly, there's been enough research by the government to see how different frequencies can impact the mind. So that, and if you just think of it on a very basic level, that we are electricity and water, and if something's vibrating and there's a grid, that it can rustle up and disturb cellular function. I think that that's for me, a very logical thing to entertain, and then to look further at the declassified document and at this petition and there is testimony. It's there. It's been suppressed. One has to look for it, and more so just keep an open mind. Also, to consider that Wuhan was was a smart city and did have a 5G there. So, and to also realize that they are injecting the narrative with misinformation, and then they are damning us, ones who are trying to suss out, because an investigative mind, a researcher, a truther, that's what we do. You have to rule out the impossibilities first, and it's by making those connections. It's like, why, like part of the Lieber thing is like, my gut says this guy, and then sure enough, more and more comes out. But you have to make that distinction in this day and age, because we're being digitally assassinated and smeared. And I was sharing with you, for instance, that they had 2 smear pieces came out dubbing me a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
When you look to see who owns the paper, it's Soros-backed.
Isn't that interesting? And speaking of the architects of this, you mentioned earlier on, you mentioned Gates, and you mentioned this, it happened, I think, in October or November last year, this scenario, this pandemic scenario.
The event, it was October.
Yeah, amazing. Unbelievable, right? So if one good thing has come out of this, it's that, and I think this is incredible, if one good thing has come out of this, it's that ordinary men and women, and I'm an ordinary guy, they are now seeing, and people are genuinely asking questions about the level of influence that somebody like Bill Gates has, not only in British academia, whether it's Imperial College, whether it's Oxford University, Cambridge University. We have a vaccine task force here in this country. It's not called a vaccine task force, it's the vaccine something network, and there are 37 people on it, and 35 of them have been bankrolled over the years by Gates Foundation to the tune of $200 million. The guy most senior, the most senior advisor to the government here, Patrick Vallance, who's a former R&D guy for GSK, for GlaxoSmithKline, that guy is in it up to his neck with Bill Gates. Everywhere you look, it's Gates, it's Gates, it's Gates, it's Gates. And that's good that people can see that. And hopefully, Maryam, more people are saying, hang on a second, this is the guy who runs Microsoft. What the hell is this guy doing? Organising a response to a pandemic. And what is he doing telling us that we need to have a vaccine for? He's a computer geek, right?
And who is he to tell us that we're not going to return to normalcy until 7 billion of us are injected?
Yeah.
And certainly there's enough footage I have shared that I found in archives and others just showing his real intentions. They stated in plain truth. And if you see who's behind these initiatives, I was looking in the past couple of days at the World Economic Forum and what was happening in Davos, like literally the day before the world experienced the biggest quarantine yet in history, which was when China locked down 5 million, then 36 million of its people. And then meanwhile, Gavi's CEO is talking about how this is a replenishment year and that we need to raise $7.4 billion. Then I found another footage where Bill Gates was referencing I believe his name was Jim Grant, the head of UNICEF, who created a model to increase vaccine rate amongst kids. What was it? Well, he created some type of model, but Bill Gates says out in the open that this guy embarrassed world leaders and praised others and managed to get the 25% rate up to 70%. Then the other day I was also, because I covered Samoa and we could see that was a test run in mass vaccinated 200,000 people in a month. And my whole impetus when I was covering that story was what kind of whose vaccine are they using? Yeah. Are they dumping as they do the MMR2 vaccine? So found for sure a source showed me the insert from the Serum Institute of India. And guess who gave the founder a Lifetime Achievement Award?
Yeah.
Billy
Gates, yeah. Billy Gates, the man responsible, as you said, and we talked about this previously, you've been talking about it, the man responsible for, untold, unimaginable misery in India and God knows where else. And it sickens me. It sickens
lots
me.
Of other places.
It sickens me, Maryam, when Gates is given access to CNN or the BBC and he talks about vaccines. And the presenter, whether it be a man or a woman, they know what Gates's vaccines have done around the world. And none of them have the balls, excuse my language, to say, hang on a second now, are you the guy who wrecked the lives of 1 million people or 500,000 people? It's probably many, many more. How do you have the front to come on here to tell us we should take a vaccine? Incredible.
What was the interview, or maybe there has been more than one with I think he's the Sanjay, the CNN reporter who appeared in the movie Contagion as the reporter who was interviewing about the contagion, and now we have it in real life. I saw another advert on vaccines or the needing to vaccine, and it was the main doctor that was in the Netflix produced pandemic. Bill Gates produced Netflix, owned by Obama or co-owned by Obama, pandemic. I also want to say that recently Dr. Birx has advised that part of the protocol for preventative measures against COVID-19 is to take the flu shot.
No.
Yes. And there is something called viral interference, where there is the theory that if two viruses are competing, one will take precedence. But there are studies that show that whistleblower Dr. Judy Mikovits, who's the author of Plague of Corruption, who we recently interviewed, states that it actually accentuates coronavirus infection. And now we are plugging that, what's been historically shown as a pretty useless flu. Now, there are those people who take the flu, who inject their children, and who are seemingly okay. There's also another clip of Bill Gates saying, well, when the side effects show, it'll be a couple of years down the line. And he just kind of like smiles. Something is not right with, he's a sociopath.
Yeah, he's a very, very unpleasant individual, Gates. And I wonder about Gates. Is Gates the front man for this?
Exactly.
He must be the front man. I mean, there are levels above Gates, I believe, responsible for this agenda, this depopulation agenda,
yes,
which I'm convinced of. And Gates is the front. Why? I could be thinking for 1,000 years, I could be mulling this over, and I'd never figure out why Gates was chosen, because he's a deeply unpleasant guy. He comes across very bad during television interviews. He's a very poor public speaker. Why Gates? Maybe it's Microsoft, maybe, I don't know. But he's a dreadful frontman. But it goes beyond Gates, doesn't it? It goes way above Gates' head.
It goes beyond Gates, because the medical mafia is so deep rooted and starts with, a certain handful of families. And I saw a clip of him laughing maniacally when asked recently how this is going to impact the economy, and I was just like, wow. He is the Antichrist, and with the patent 060606, it's just like living sci-fi, living a bad Hollywood movie.
We're in the Twilight Zone, aren't we? You and me, we are in our own episode of the Twilight Zone, because I can't believe that people have acquiesced in the way they have. I thought initially, it proves that I am very naive still. I thought the public would not take the lockdown. I thought they won't put up with this. They will figure out that they are being told to basically change their lives, maybe permanently, and wreck their financial futures because of a bad flu. I thought surely they're going to, the people will stand up, and they haven't, Maryam. They've rolled over people.
I don't know what the climate is there. Certainly this shows, and certainly they're studying. The FEMA whistleblower stated that depending on whether the people would be submissive or rise up would dictate the next moves. And when I interviewed John Rappaport and I said, I think this is a live exercise, he said, even if it's not a live exercise, it's a live exercise, because they are observing our reactions. So every day when I see in America protests, and I'm not one, I have my own way of showing activism. I get chills. I'm so happy that people are going out maskless. And I saw yesterday, did you see one, Project Veritas was exposing CBS and their fake reporting. But yesterday they put out a segment on this, what I think is a faux whistleblower, this Rick Bright, who is coming out, and then the clip from CBS was showing how President Trump is ditching social distancing, and how this supposed whistleblower was put in another job or ousted because he did not want to, he was not behind hydrochloroquine. But I think that's all faux. Have you seen that segment?
Yeah, I have seen it. Yeah, it's made the news here today, of course, because they say it implicates Trump. It shows the cavalier approach that Trump's government has taken to the virus. So it's made the news here. Yeah.
And what is your take on?
I don't know. You see, I mean, whether we spoke about this previous time, I don't fit anywhere on the political spectrum. I don't believe in any of them. I mean, whether it's the genocidal maniac Hillary Clinton, or Trump, it doesn't matter.
It's all theatrics.
It's all theatrics, basically, and the house always wins, no matter who's in the office. That's how I feel. Yeah.
And so Richie, then what is the solution for the people as they are under voluntary house arrest and their rights are being taken away around the world, and they are gripped by fear? Certainly over time, there are people who are waking up. Like, if I can give you an example, I was speaking to my mom and I was telling her, Mommy, this is just all exaggerated with a lot of ulterior motives. And she's like, but Mary, how can the whole world be lying?
Yeah.
And then she said, and how about Dr. Fauci? So really, it's slowly kind of picking at this illusion, and pharmacia, it means sorcery. And they have cast a spell, and they have people have forgotten the incredible power of the immune system. And if I could be someone that had, was hit by a car, had to learn how to walk again, got exposed by sprays, had lupus and fibromyalgia, and I could sit here and had mold toxicity, and I could sit here and say, I turn to natural remedies and I'm here and I'm well. It certainly wasn't with Western medicine and their treadmill of sick care. So can we focus on what we can do and see the silver lining? This is a wake-up call. I don't know, Richie, if people don't wake up to this,
it's over. It's game over. If I think what researchers like yourself do. I'm not a researcher. Well, I do a lot of research, obviously, but I'm not an investigative journalist in the way that maybe I was some years ago. I'm a journalist in terms of I have a platform and I seek out very interesting voices who've got an alternative viewpoint on current events, and I bring them on because I enjoy speaking with them. And so I'm different to you. And what I would always suggest, and I don't mean, when I suggest this, I don't mean you because you're very experienced. What I would say to any other would be Maryam Henein listening, if you're going to start looking into this, you've got to become more and more professional in terms of what it is you're doing. Your production standards have got to be absolutely amazing in order to get the attention or grab the attention of people. And I'm not saying that to you, Maryam, because you know this, because your documentary and your films.
Yes, but it does apply because if you're being attacked or you have
Absolutely.
your company's being attacked, and let's face it, I'm reporting for Twitter now because it's in real time, because the mainstream, and I'm putting together presentations. But if you have freedom of speech, but you don't have freedom of reach, because, so that's why it's like, I'm also looking to collaborate, cross-pollinate, and say, like, I'm doing this for free. I'm pulling links and footage and reading this 10 hours a day. All I want is to have my voice. I don't even care about the money because that's not what drives me. Yeah. So there's also that, and I'm very cognizant of the fact that you have to stand out of the clutter. That's part of the problems. There's so much clutter and so much disinfo. And then, of course, when you have the WHO dictating to YouTube and demonizing vitamin C.
That's right.
Demonizing silver, demonizing, possible medications that are generic, like like hydrochloroquine, that doesn't come without its side effects, and you have to be discerning. But opting for, Gilead. Who has stakes in Gilead? NIH, Fauci. I think there's a certain amount of people are fed up, and we will see the level of disobedience, or if people will be respectful as they have been in the US. I don't know if you caught this, but I've been listening to the pressers, and last week there was the last presser that was held outside when President Trump left the podium. You could hear in the background, if you listen very carefully, there was a protest. And then they started holding them inside. And now President Trump went to Arizona and was plugging more ventilators and masks. And this niche industry also, let's point out to the niche industry that has been created around coronavirus, from isolation beds to faulty tests, to antibody tests, to these hospital, all of this. Why is the task force partnering with places like donuts, like Dunkin' Donuts or Pizza Hut? Is that what the people need to eat for their immune system? Hell no.
The problem we have, and we're going to wrap this up now in the next 2 or 3 minutes. Okay. I'll give you the final. Yes. I'll give you the final word, of course, Maryam. We're back to the same thing that I've been talking about since I began doing this type of program on commercial radio back in 2009. We're back to the same horrible thing. The mainstream media is impotent, because much of what you discussed with me tonight, as intelligent as you are, and you undoubtedly are, it didn't take you very long to discover some of these facts. It's right there. The relationships between the people you mentioned, Lieber, Gates, that idiot Neil Ferguson here in the UK, Patrick Vallance. It's there. But yet still most people, sadly, 99.99% of people are still getting their news from these sources. Your lovely mum, she says to you, but sure, how can the world be lying? Maryam, I'm your brother. My family are the same. My fiance's family are the same. Caroline's family are the same. Caroline's mother's in the northeast of France. And obviously she doesn't speak English, she speaks French. And she says to Caroline, is Richie still making a living, talking all that crap on the air, telling those stories? You know, I still love the lady. But that's how, you know, I love her anyway. But that's how it is, right? So what do you do? I mean, what do you do? I think what you do and others is right. You keep getting better at what you do. You do a great job. You understand production. You keep getting better. You don't lose your temper. You stay calm. You stay serene. And eventually the penny drops for people more and more. I think that's the only way forward, at least for the independent media anyway. Let me just remind our listeners, and by the way, in your final word, do plug Vaxter and do plug your own YouTube channel. Not that you need to, you get lots and lots of views. Maryam Henein has been speaking to us live from Costa Rica today, and I can't believe that I only found out yesterday that Zach Voorhees is your other half. Zach did a great program with me about a year and a half ago, where he talked about what's really going on at Google. And it was lovely having him on, and I had no idea that he was that you were partners. It's just as well I didn't say anything bad about him, isn't it? Otherwise we'd be in trouble. But no, he's a lovely guy, Zach.
That's great.
Yeah, he's a great
Zach's
guy.
Great, and it's been great to be, you know, that's what we do all day is, you know, share information together and research. And so it's awesome. And I met him because I was writing about techno-fascism and what had occurred to my health site and many others, and wanted to see if he could cement some of my findings, like Google's a drug company. And that's how we met. And I would like to just invite people to follow me on Twitter. I work for tweets.
I know it's mad.
And I am also to buzz on over to honeycolony.com, where we have beautiful products and information, a lot of information that was ahead of its time on how to empower yourself to be your own best health advocate. And I just wish in these times, my final words is kindness to one another, to realize that we are humans and that we learn through our mistakes, and that this could serve as a moment for us to really, like a lot of our crap is coming up and fears, to really go within. And if you've lost your job, maybe see, did you even like your job? What opportunities can this event bring to your life? And how can we band together, alone but together, to stop this nonsense? For me, I think, you know, like you said, keeping your composure, keeping vigilant, to keep on saying, having the courage to say, call this live exercise off. It's not to dismiss that there isn't a virus. It's not to dismiss people are dying, but folks, people die every day. And we know that officials are being bribed and coerced to misclassify deaths as coronavirus. The story should end there when we see that the data is bloated, compromised. So that's my final message, and I'm super grateful to you, Richie, for giving me a voice.
Not at all. You have a great voice. I don't need to give you any voice at all. It's good to have you on the programme, and I look forward to you coming back again.
Thank
Maryam.
you, Richie.
Thanks for your time today. It looks
Thank
beautiful
you. Blessings.
there. And blessings to you
Bye.
too, and to Zach.
Thanks.
Bye for now. That was the lovely Maryam Henein live on the line from the wonderful Costa Rica, which I had the pleasure of visiting for a few weeks back in 2002. I imagine it's slightly different now than it was when I was there